Welcome to the Catholic Psych Show. I'm here with Jack Beers. My name is Dr. Bryan Violette. Today we will be talking about Caitlin Clark. We'll be talking about a Catholic bishop commenting on President Joe Biden and some science news in the world of medicine on IBD and Crohn's disease. And maybe we will get to an article about the last 25 years in pictures. Jack, thank you for coming back on the show. How are you doing after a long week of travel? You're replacing Dr. Greg, who is still in prison. He may make parole on Monday. How are you?
Well, I'm fired up. I'm at the end of a travel week, so you're just gonna have. I'm just gonna be shooting stuff left and right. They're replacing my AC unit, so I'm a little cranky, a little fired up, but I'm always happy to hang out with Dr. Bryan. How's your week been?
Great. Just trying to hold the fort down while Dr. Greg is, in chains in an orange jumpsuit. But things are good. Eventful work week. As all the fans of the Catholic Psych Show know, I'm a huge Boston Celtics fan. So we won game 1 last night of the NBA Finals. But this is not a sports show. Despite our first topic, this is not a sports show.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, we're going to talk today about Caitlin Clark. It's a sports story which has transcended sports, and we can't ignore it. You and I made reference to it when you came on. I think it was a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
But the story just keeps making its way to the headlines because there are certainly racial and cultural undertones to the story. So for those of you who don't know, let me read a little something to you here about who Caitlin Clark is. So Caitlin Clark is now a WNBA basketball player who had a lot of success in college. And there are a lot of eyes on her because of her performance in the NCAA tournament. And now she is bringing a lot of those eyes and fame and popularity to her presence in the WNBA, and has even received various multi-million-dollar shoe deals and advertisement deals. She's on State Farm commercials, and there's a new interest in the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is a heterosexual white female, and there's been quite a reaction to this. So let me read a little something here. So there's nothing more divisive in sports right now than the mere existence of Caitlin Clark, who's inspired record viewership, controversial hard fouls. This is when the story started to get popular. Was the hard fouls, and as we saw yesterday, prominent media members to lose their mind. So some famous sports reporters like Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee, I forget her first name, Monica McNutt, are all coming up with reasons as to why Caitlin Clark has been as popular as she's been, and are trying to make sense of the reactions around the league. So around the league itself, a lot of the other female basketball players have been treating her absolutely terribly. I mean, really hard fouls, beating her up, calling her a bitch, right? We're not gonna swear quite yet. We leave all our swearing to the second half of the show, and calling out her whiteness and her heterosexuality, and she's being mistreated. This is becoming a racial and sexual orientation issue. What is your first kind of reaction to this story?
Well, my first, before it started getting racial and about her sexual preferences, I thought, like, this is normal and fantastic for the sport of the WNBA, because this is essentially what happened to Michael Jordan and LeBron James. So when Michael Jordan came into the league, and he was highly touted, and he's dropping 25, 30, 35 points and just dominating the league as a rookie. Like, what did the Detroit Pistons do? They literally beat him up. Like, they just literally beat him up in the league. And they weren't the only ones. Like, the whole objective was, we're going to punish this kid. Right.
So what typically happens is that if there is someone that is very special in a sport and enters into an established league, the existing members of that league put them through a sort of hazing, him or her now, through a hazing kind of trial period where they're very physical, we had LeBron James also comment on the Caitlin Clark story, and he talked about how his own teammates didn't like him when he first came in the league.
Right.
Because it's like we've been here, we've paid our dues. Now all of a sudden you haven't done anything yet, and you're getting all this attention. So that's like that is the template that we would expect for talented young people coming into a popularized league already. However,
now it's gotten personal. Now it's crossed this threshold of like media members who want to protect Caitlin Clark, who literally want to shield her, which, by the way, I actually don't think she needs any protection. She's a baller. She's trash talker. Like, she's tough. Like,
she's saying all the right things. I'm just playing the game. I got to play through it. I got to expect this.
Yeah, absolutely. She is playing the role of the bona fide star. And in many ways, publicly, I think Angel Reese, which is like the villain in many of the scenarios, especially like the first pushing down and all that stuff. Also saying a lot of
she was clapping from the bench when Caitlin Clark got like really hit very, very hard on the court for no reason. It was not a basketball play. Right. And she was called a bitch by this woman, by this other black woman, knocked her on the ground. And then Angel Reese, who was also a very popular basketball player, and the two of them went head to head in the NCAA tournament, who happens to be African-American, is also extremely resentful. And she's not catching the same heat as Caitlin Clark.
Oh, and she's like, every story needs a hero and a villain. Like, I'm happy to play the role of the villain. And I don't think she's wrong. I actually think it's an astute observation that they're in sports, this dynamic.
Yes.
But the crossing over to it becoming racial and sexual orientation, and there being sort of this psychological prejudice side of the bullying, where it's like trying to deeply chop this person down mentally, not just physically, not just like, hey, you got to earn it. Once you earn your stripes, we'll all respect you. But like, here's the way I've been thinking about it. Like, she could earn people's respect the way that LeBron earned his teammates' respect by working hard, playing well, being a great teammate, right? She can't change the fact that she's white and heterosexual, you know?
Sure. But do you think that race and her sexual orientation do not play a part at all in why the WNBA is now becoming more popular because of her?
I don't, because look how many of the stars in the WNBA up to this point, like, they've been white,
but they've been gay. They've been lesbians.
Have all of them been gay?
The more popular ones. Let me read something. A racial component when discussing brand ambassadors may make people uncomfortable, but it's a conversation that needs consideration. So that's race. Sue Bird, who is white and gay, and one of the legends of women's basketball, addressed it in 2020 while discussing the league's inability at that time to capture the country's attention in the same way U.S. women's soccer, the national soccer team, had done. Quote, even though we're female athletes playing at a high level, our worlds, the soccer world and the basketball world, are just totally different, she said. And to be blunt, it's the demographic of who's playing. Women's soccer players generally are cute little white girls.
Wow.
And we are all shapes and sizes. A lot of black, gay, tall women. There's maybe an intimidation factor, and people are quick to judge it and put it down. So do you think at all that the product is not has not been influenced by the actual players in the league?
So I actually think it's just been boring. I mean, do I think that there's some aspect of it? Do I think that there's some racial aspect of it? Do I think that there's some portion of the population that doesn't want to watch because of a racial thing? Like,
what about the sexual side of things?
Sure,
that they're not cute little white girls.
I don't think that's dominating it. Like, America loves sports. Like, one of the reasons why women's soccer, in my opinion, works really well is because you have the event of the World Cup and you have the event of the Olympics, and there's like an American patriotism. Olympics, World Cup happens 4 times, like once every 4 years, and they were also like the best. right? The best of the best in the world. It was like a whole patriotic thing more than it was, I want to watch little white girls do some sport. Women's basketball, like there's been no drama. The skill level hasn't been that great. It's like, why would I watch women's basketball?
The counter argument to that is that's not true. The counter argument would be that because like you as a like white man aren't interested in the presentation of the product of women competing in a sport because your standard is influenced by the male because you are a male.
I mean, maybe that gets to the whole argument of like it's unconscious. Like my bias is unconscious, and I've watched all white women play basketball, and I've watched aspects of the WNBA or women's college basketball, and I've never watched it and thought, man, that was an enjoyable game to watch. But that first championship game between, or I think it was the Final Four game between Angel Reese's team and Caitlin Clark's team, Iowa. That was a really good basketball game. It was exciting. It was high quality play. I was like, man, yeah, I haven't watched women's basketball in 3 or 4 years, and 3 or 4 years ago it was really boring. That wasn't boring.
Yeah,
and it didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think this is a question of knowing your audience, and I think that a male, like men, are predominantly the audience for sports. I mean, predominantly the audience, and men have certain expectations in terms of what they are interested in terms of sports. So the athleticism of basketball players is obviously at a higher level watching men, but that doesn't diminish the talent level of like the female players. But in terms of the aesthetic and the typical viewership of sports, men are going to be interested in watching men. You're not seeing Caitlin Clark doing 360-degree dunks, right? Like you would the men. But the interesting thing about Caitlin Clark is she's shooting threes from 28, 29, 30 feet, which is just like Steph Curry. And there's like a physical giftedness and talent there, which does draw the eye in a way that is atypical for women's sports. So she's like kind of like a female version of Steph Curry, who has in the male world captured the imagination. But I think that from the perspective of those who are putting forth the WNBA product, there's always a desire to increase the reach of the product and enter into new markets. So it's okay. Maybe we can take some men and help and have them appreciate women's basketball, but then also draw in more women. To me, it's not dissimilar to what's happening in the world of Star Wars. Like the problem with Kathleen Kennedy and Disney in creating a Star Wars show that is, this new show that just came out called Acolyte supposedly is getting more woke by the day, right? And so the idea is, well, we already have the captured male audience. Let's increase like our market share and have new audiences that are more progressive enter into the world of Star Wars. That's the point. But like in so doing, you're alienating your primary fan base, which is men. So if the new show has no male white characters who resemble a hero at all on the show, like men who are primarily your audience, make up the bulk of your audience, are not going to be as interested anymore. So in trying to expand the reach of the audience, you're lopping off huge portions of it. So the expectation that all you need to do is keep your audience of all men who like sports or all men who like Star Wars, and now add women or add those with progressive values and the LGBTQ community. And like now we're just going to make more money because more people, being as inclusive as we can be, are going to be interested in our sport or our IP or whatever it is. Like that's not what has happened. I think the same thing was the logic behind the Bud Light hire of the transgender CEO. It's like, we got these people. How can we grow? Well, let's tap into this audience. But the reality is, in trying to tap into a new audience, you're alienating the other audience and you're losing overall losing interest or not gaining interest in the case of the WNBA. So, to assume that, okay, the product is what it is. The players are very diverse in terms of race and ethnic background and sexual orientation. But to say that I'm saying that people don't like sports because the news media hasn't given enough attention to it. Well, I mean, I don't know that it's fair to expect that men who are used to a particular type of sports presentation are going to automatically like this product. Are you tracking with what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think the evidence of this is like, there's a lot more people watching the WNBA right now, right?
Yes.
Look at, if we were looking at it from a research perspective, it's like, what has changed about the WNBA this season from last season? It's like,
just Caitlin Clark, really?
Right. That's like, are there less gay women in women's basketball now this year than there were last year? No. Are there less black women in basketball as the stars? No. Like, what is the difference? And are there less, white female stars or more white female stars? I guess technically there's one more, but it's like the league up to that point had been driven by white female stars because they were the best player. So it's like nothing has changed except the fact that this one player is significantly more exciting to watch in the way that she passes, in the way that she shoots, in the way that she plays. So like for me, and it's different than the Star Wars thing, because the Star Wars thing, the Acolyte, it's literally getting after fundamental principles and masculinity as a whole. Like it's not just not including white men. It's also getting after white men.
Yeah, it's attacking the values. Yeah.
Right. So if
attacking traditional values. Star Wars
right. If all of a sudden we were watching WNBA games and part of the celebration is that two women would just start like making out, that it would just be like, and it was like, this is part of WNBA basketball, is that we're propagating this thing. Yeah. Then there would be like an offensive aspect to it too. Like that, then it would be brought in. But this is just about sports. This is about the quality of the game, and this is about a person elevating it.
Well, yes, I do want to sympathize though with the position of those WNBA players who have, put their blood, sweat, and tears into this sport and dedicated their life to it, and have not gotten the viewership and not gotten the eyeballs until a heteronormative white female who is talented came to play, because it's entirely unfair to say that there hasn't been talent at the same level as what Caitlin Clark has offered in the history of the WNBA. There's amazingly talented women. I mean, there's women I grew up in Connecticut where it's women's basketball country because the UConn women have been so dominant, and there's a huge fan base for the UConn women here. And I've seen some very, very talented female basketball players come through. And, I just think there probably is an unconscious interest in the sports audience because Caitlin Clark is white, and there is something different, and she is heterosexual. There is something different about her coming in. And I'm not saying it's a conscious racial bias or anything like that, but talent has always been there in the WNBA at the same level of Caitlin Clark anyway. I mean, you can compare it to like the pro men. I mean, if you put LeBron James in the WNBA, he scored like 100 points a game. That's like the Chappelle joke, right? Like, okay, let's have LeBron play in the WNBA. But in terms of relatively speaking, the primary difference isn't talent. I think it's that she's white.
Well, I would just draw the line. Like, I'm totally fine with Caitlin Clark getting hazed in the WNBA and people being frustrated that that's sports.
Yeah.
So I'm a Angel Reese. I think
you're okay with hazing in sports.
Yeah, on the court with that type of stuff, absolutely. Not like the dangerous stuff that people would do or the psychologically messed up stuff, but like you got to earn your respect. You're going to get a lot of tough show. I'm all for that. I just think that the interest in Caitlin Clark has a lot more to do with type of game. I should have used type of game instead of talent, like type of game than it does white and heterosexual.
Like the distant 3-point shots and all that.
Yeah. That's and the Iowa, it's only her. She's dropping all these points. The country's gotten more interested in sports. I think it's a perfect storm. And I think it's more of that. I don't think it's 50-50. I don't think it's 60-40. I think it's predominantly her game. But
yeah.
But what do I know?
I think it's very difficult to measure that. I think these are all factors that play into it. There's just so many great quotes in the news. A straight woman who is joining a league with a sizable LGBTQ plus player population, and a person who comes from America's heartland, where residents often feel their beliefs and values are ignored or disrespected by the geographical edges of the country. That's why she has supposedly this writer's opinion. Clark's attractiveness to local companies and national corporations is heightened by the fact that she is a white woman who has dominated a sport that is viewed as predominantly black and gay. So it's saying that she represents the heartland of America, where those people feel marginalized, typically at the level of the popular media in terms of what's shown to the world. And so it's like she's a voice for those people. And I think this happens in politics. Right? I think this happens in a lot of different genres. So
I think it's viable.
It's all of it. It's all of it. And she's incredibly talented and can shoot 3-pointers like no woman has been able to shoot 3-pointers. So
yeah. And she's trash talking, and they had the whole college thing.
Yeah.
And people can't attach to. I think if you look at the NBA, there's no American star, like young American star anymore either. Like, who's the face of the league? It's like it's Giannis or it's Luka or it's Joker. It's like, who's the face of the looking for an American who's great at this.
That's why they're crowning Anthony Edwards before his time, because he's black, but he's an American, and people want to root for someone that is familiar to them.
And an American. So I think there's so many factors at play, and I am just pumped for all the women in women's basketball that they get to have this moment, because they work their tails off and they deserve to have a piece of the pie.
They do. It's just there's always this culture. There's just identity politic, racial politics, like overlay to so many different stories now, and I think it's important to acknowledge it, be sensitive to it, but see that it's not the fullness of the picture.
Yeah. No desire to invalidate it, but
yeah. And so, like, from a Catholic perspective, what is this Catholic psychological perspective? How can we tie a bow on this story? What's the best way to think of this? What's the best way to make sense of this turmoil and this chaos around these racial and sexual issues in terms of like all these different areas of our country? Like, what do we do?
I
know that's a huge question.
I know. I always enter into these moments of like, it's so big and we have so little personal influence over these things. It always makes me try and refocus in on, like, what do I have control over? I have control over my own interior life. I have control over my own ability to walk with my own mentor to understand like what's happening at my own subconscious level, and what's driving desire, what's driving behavior, what's driving relationships. Like, how can I be the healthiest, least, racist or biased version of myself, to the point where the world does get a little bit better and a little bit truer through me, and I'm not adding to the hypocrisy, to the violence, to the terror, to all that stuff. That's where my mind always goes on big questions like that. What about you?
All of that for sure. Like, operating at a lower level, working on myself to increase my capacity to love people as best I can, to get in as healthy a psychological place as I can. But also, I don't think there's anything wrong with hoping for equity in terms of recognition and financial remuneration for what people are able to accomplish and their skill set. I mean, there's a part of me that would love to be able to watch basketball in the summertime and be interested in it. And I think it's great for the sport. I like to be as, my hope for like Star Wars is that I don't even have to that it's inclusive, and that I don't see that it's inclusive. Like to get to a point where I don't see the agenda as part of the product, but it just naturally is, and there's people of all different shapes and sizes and genders and aliens and all that in the show. So like I get it. I get discouraged at the division. I do not like division. This is a great segue into our next topic, because we're going to talk about division in a moment. But you know, probably my own stuff, my own family, my own discomfort with division. I want to bring people together and unify them. And, I often just see like issues like this as cause for division, cause for unrest, and we're not walking in the same direction together. So I'm always trying to see other people's point of view. I want to see the point of view of these players who are treating Caitlin Clark terribly. I think my knee-jerk reaction is to come to Caitlin Clark's side, but that seems insufficient to me in terms of how we heal as a culture, and to to empathize with, like, yeah, it probably stinks that you've worked as hard as you have, and you're not paid anywhere near the same amount as men. And you see men making millions and millions and millions of dollars, putting them in the same amount of effort and having the same relative talent as you, and in your league. And I think that is unfair. And I think I would be angry too. And that's the proper response to injustice. So I try to empathize with the position as best I can. Do I think that it's morally reprehensible to treat her the way you've been treating her? I mean, you would say no. You'd say that's part of the hazing process of sports. I think competition, and we talked about this, I think it was in our last show, like real competition between people, you want to do your best. And in order for it to be spiritually healthy, you also want your opponent to do their best and wish them well. Or else it's you versus them, and you can get caught up in this sort of hierarchy and hurting other people to put yourself above them, to rise above it. And that's highly problematic from a spiritual and psychological standpoint. So,
yeah, it's not good for their soul that they're treating her the way that they are. I just, that was sort of my way of being like, I get why they're doing it. And there's a long track record of history of that.
Yeah.
And a long psychological, from a media perspective, a long psychological history of loving that. Loving that narrative, and that narrative being essential to the rise and growth of the sport. So it's like,
it's great drama. I mean, we're talking about it. This is great. Like, there's no bad press, right? This is great press for the WNBA, the fact that we're talking about it in women's sports.
Yeah.
So,
and I wish that was just the conversation.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I'm with you on that. All right. Speaking of division and tension at a high level, we're also going to talk about President Joe Biden. And I've talked before on this show about how upset I am that our president fashions himself as a Roman Catholic and espouses values that are not consistent with the teachings of the Catholic Church. And I've tried over and over again to make sense of how such a public figure is allowed to identify as Catholic, receive communion, call himself Catholic, and then he's making a sign of the cross at a pro-choice rally, things like that. Now we finally have a bishop, a cardinal and a bishop, speaking out against President Joe Biden's moral positions and what that means for his identity as a Catholic. So there is a popular YouTube video by Bishop Thomas Paprocki of Illinois, in which it's entitled "Biden Mocks the Catholic Faith." And he doesn't go as far as to saying that this is actual heresy, because he talks about canonical due process, but he strongly implies in this video that President Biden is acting heretically, is a heretic. And this video has gained significant popularity and support, because there's a lot of Catholics who are upset with Biden's identity as a Catholic and some of his moral choices. But one of the questions asked to him in this interview, in a follow-up interview, is, why are so few bishops taking this stance? Why has this been allowed to continue for as long as it has? And his basic response has been, well, we've been waiting. we've been waiting. We didn't feel like it was our jurisdiction to talk about the president because he's not in our diocese. And finally, Cardinal Wilton Gregory, who is the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., came out and called, I think it was on Fox News, called President Biden a cafeteria Catholic. Some of us know what that means, a cafeteria Catholic, but it's those Catholics who pick and choose aspects of church teaching that they like, and they either ignore or push back against church teaching that they don't like. So that kind of opened the door for other people to make some comment, like offer some commentary on President Biden. It's a relief to me because I've been pissed off about this for a long time. What is your reaction to this story, about this video by Bishop Paprocki? How long it took Cardinal Gregory to say something, and just your perspective on President Biden being pro-choice and being Catholic.
Yeah, well, I actually think there's another factor in here that resulted in him saying this at this point in time, and I think it's Harrison Butker. I think a huge aspect of Harrison Butker's speech was calling out the silence of church leadership in the face of what is obviously sacrilegious and likely heresy.
And he was calling out bishops, wasn't he?
He was calling them out left and right, and even to the point of like, this is worthy of excommunication, right? And I think that resonated with a number of priests and bishops who self-reflected and thought, there's some truth to that. And so I think that's one aspect. I think another aspect is like, when the Harrison Butker thing happened, I really underestimated the power of someone just saying something, regardless of what the actual content was, but somebody actually standing up and suggesting things or saying something that's, from a sentiment perspective, resonated with a lot of people. Like if I listen to Cardinal Wilton Gregory and really just actually dissect his sentences, I'm actually still pretty riled up. Like the idea of cafeteria Catholic is, I'm going to pick some things I like and some things I don't like. That is not what Joe Biden is doing. That is an inappropriate articulation of what Joe Biden is doing.
Oh, say more.
Joe Biden is saying, I'm Catholic because of this. Now this thing, abortion over here, he's not like, I'm just not going to have any of that pro-life stuff. He's literally standing up on the table and saying,
it's okay to be Catholic and believe this.
It's holy.
Yeah.
To abort children. It is like, if Christ were here, he would be pro-abortion. He is standing at the top of the mountain, the literal top of the mountain of the free world, and saying, if Christ were here, he would be standing next to me, advocating for abortion.
It is not holy to abort children. Let's be clear. Yes,
though that's what he's saying, right? Like he is standing up there saying, so he's not ignoring it. He's not
right.
Like
I said, there's that image of him making the sign of a cross at a pro-choice rally. It's like he's bringing in. There's a lot of people out there. There are a lot of quote cafeteria Catholics out there, and like that don't actually comprehend that to live a Catholic life, you must follow the fullness of faith. You have to ascend to the fullness of faith and strive to live according to that teaching. Now, Bishop Paprocki made the distinction between there's a difference between a sinner and a heretic. A sinner believes all of it, but can't live a perfect life because of original sin and concupiscence and everything else. So they fall short, right? But that's different than saying, I don't believe in Holy Mother Church's teaching on this. And then that's amplified by the fact that he's a president. It's like giving permission to people to live that way.
It's also different. It's also different if he were to come out and say, like, legally, I am not, for the sake of the Constitution, like the old adage, as ridiculous as it was, which is, I am pro-life, but the Constitution allows for abortion. Like even even that is a step better than being like, oh no, this is just a good thing. It's constitutional, and I'm pro-choice because abortion is like a good thing.
Right.
Like that is, and then making the sign of the cross, it is an act of sacrilege. It's 100% an act of sacrilege, and it's a public act of sacrilege. So like Wilton Gregory has seen this, and the only proper response. Now we could talk about whether or not you agree with the church's operation in this, but the only proper response to that is to deny communion. Like that is
and maybe excommunicate.
There's a whole process of writing letters and trying to reach out and following Jesus's, where you go and you have one-on-one conversation, then you bring the church together, and then you do it publicly, and then they're gone, right? Like there's a whole system that the church has set up.
Yeah, the canonical process. But Bishop Thomas also said that that's actually not strictly necessary, because you might privately reject church teaching and never tell anyone, but still, because of your interior disposition, you are technically on heretical grounds.
Yeah, you can excommunicate yourself, which is which is what he suggested, and he didn't go all the way out saying it. So I when I listen to the bishop, I'm like, we're still equivocating, right? We're still playing to it. However, I can take the step-by-step appreciation. No one was saying anything. Now someone is saying something and calling it out, and titling their video.
Yeah.
Mocking Biden mocks the Catholic faith. Like he really should have said Biden is in a state of sacrilege. But you know, I'm okay with the progress.
How do you feel about Bishop Thomas's explanation that the reason he hasn't said anything, and the reason that a bunch of bishops haven't said anything, is that they're waiting for it wasn't their diocese, and they're waiting for someone else, waiting for the cardinal to say something? I think that's garbage.
It's a cop-out.
I think it's garbage. He's the president of the United States. That president is going to influence your flock as a bishop.
Yes, and I think there's also a statement of speaking the truth in charity is more important than following the letter of the law of the order of commentary. Like, okay, I'm gonna lose being bishop of this diocese. It's like the state of the souls of the people under your care who are literally deciding whether or not you can be Catholic and vote for Joe Biden. Yeah. You have to comment on it. You have to comment.
Yeah. I wonder two things. Number one, I mean, I think the most obvious explanation for them not choosing to speak out is fear, right? They yes. You know, for fear of backlash for maintaining that position, maybe losing the faithful within their own diocese. But I also wonder if there's not just politics among the bishops. Like, these guys all know each other. You know, there's not that many bishops in the world. Yeah. You know, I wonder if there's like an interpersonal social dynamic where they don't want to step on each other's toes, and they don't want to publicly come out and condemn one another. And like, you know, they probably all know Cardinal Gregory. I'm sure they know him well.
For sure.
Right? If you're the Archbishop of Illinois, you probably know the Archbishop or the Cardinal of DC on a personal level. So I wonder if there's like a different kind of fear, like an interpersonal fear.
I don't mean to not have empathy for it. Like, I have empathy for it. I've been in situations in which, like, I didn't do the right thing because I had convinced myself that there's a line of obedience and respect and order of things that's important. So like, I can totally wrap my mind around how that decision was made and how they got to it. Yeah. But I think the response of the faithful is like, please stop. Please stop doing that. Please
shepherd us.
Please be courageous, and please speak it, and say the full thing, regardless of what the repercussions might be. Like, father us. Like, be a dad. Don't be like, you know.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at our chat. These are some hot button issues. Caitlin Clark and the bishop. We haven't had anybody chime in yet. I'm curious if people are having some reactions or thoughts on all our platforms today regarding what we're talking about. Caitlin Clark, and bishops commenting on Joe Biden being a heretic, and and him potentially being excommunicated. No one has an opinion on that.
Yeah.
No one listening has anything to say about that. Jack and I are the only two people that have something to say. So if you have some thoughts, please pop them in the chat. And we can come back to them. So come back to these topics too. But I want to shift gears again a little bit, shift to a new topic. I want to talk about it's seems to be providential that the story came up today, given your own history. But we're going to talk about IBD and Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel diseases. We're gonna just keep on talking about shit.
Yeah, well, poop is a big theme in the world. You know, we didn't talk about the Biden dynamic around that either, but you know, it's
right.
a big theme.
Right. So, in the news now, scientists have found a weak spot in our DNA that's present in 95% of people with the disease. A major cause of inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, which is super common nowadays, which I think might even be aggravated by anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
You hear people with stomach issues all the time, has been discovered by UK scientists. It makes it much easier for some immune cells to go haywire and drive excessive inflammation in the bowels. The group of researchers at the Francis Crick Institute and University College London performed a deep genetic analysis to try and unpick the cause of IBD. Okay, the team has found that drugs already exist seem to reverse the disease in laboratory experiments and are now aiming for human trials. So Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are the most common forms of inflammatory bowel disease. They are estimated to affect 500,000 people in the UK. Obviously, that's not an adult number. I mean, not a number for the United States. But it hurts a lot of people here too. And it often starts as a teenager or young adult. So I know that you have Crohn's disease. So what's your reaction to this story? Genetic mutations in Crohn's disease causing inflammatory issues, and tell us a little of your story. Like, why is this relevant to you?
Well, you'd think I would, and I think it's really relevant into the psychological field as well. So I had Crohn's. I got diagnosed with Crohn's when I was 11. It normally takes 18 to 20 months or something along those lines on average to diagnose Crohn's or colitis or IBD in general. And it took like 4 months for me. Like, it was intense, and it was intense fast. And I was immediately put on specific types of medication, and the side effects of the medication were the very things that I was struggling with. So it just exasperated it.
Yeah, it's just tough to know. Yeah,
it made it worse. And the doctors, they sat my parents down and they were like, "You're going to have 3 hospital stays a year, every year for the rest of your life. Like, you're going to be disabled. We have access to the best medication in the world, but it's bad." And I remember when I got diagnosed, there was an article in the paper about a kid who got diagnosed when he was 9, and he didn't make it to his 18th birthday. And it's not that like Crohn's kills you. It's just that the medication that they give you, it depresses your immune system so much that like you die of the flu or pneumonia or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It was bad. Anyway, I've been in remission for like 15 years or something like that.
Woo!
Which is amazing.
How did he do it, folks?
Well, So and it's been through diet. So there are several food regimens that can work for Crohn's and colitis. The one that I'm specifically on is the specific carbohydrate diet. But the way that it's described as the diet is like medication suppresses the immune system, so it masks the symptoms. So you don't actually know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And Crohn's has the ability to be adaptive. So it'll move around in your system. So sometimes you'll get like a surgery that cuts out the infected part of your intestines if you have Crohn's. But then Crohn's is like the gene is on. So it just moves to a new place.
Yes.
If you try it. And then the medication itself, you have no visibility, you have no consciousness to kind of what's happening. Whereas the way that the food works is it bypasses the dysfunctional system. So you only eat food that doesn't require the dysfunctional system. So I eat a very specific amount of food and very specific types of food, because I found that it just doesn't trigger the dysfunctional part.
I once saw you eat 4 steaks.
Yeah. It's a lot.
I was very jealous.
Yeah, a lot of meat and veggies.
I want that diet.
Yeah, you can. It's available to you.
Yes.
But I could actually feel everything. So I'm conscious to the way that my body operates, and I can adapt and move the lever of food and rest and other things along those lines in order to be healthy. And the other thing is that, like, Crohn's really IBD didn't become a major part of human history and a major factor in human history until we started eating preservatives and we started eating terrible food, and we started putting things in our bodies that weren't real or natural. It's like there was no IBD in cavemen.
Everything in the middle of the grocery store. I have a friend that said, he worked at a grocery store. He says, don't eat anything in the middle of the store. Yeah. Just stay on the outside. Produce, all the stuff on the outside is good. The fresh stuff. Yeah.
So psychologically speaking, there are so many parallels to masking symptoms and removing your own consciousness of what's actually happening internally, and doing things that actually technically exacerbate your problem when you're hoping that it's going to be fixed. But for me, it's like, I read that, I'm like, how about we just get rid of all of the crap in our food and in our water and in our environment, and then you know what, it'll all probably go away. But instead, we're going to try to figure out a drug that turns off the gene. It's like, good luck.
Yeah. So okay, so you weren't you did not read this article favorably. This didn't excite you.
No. I mean, if it works, and like you and I could actually go out and have a beer, and I can have a burger and French fries, like, you know what? I'll probably be happy that day.
Or a Pop-Tart, start your day with a Pop-Tart.
Oh, gosh. I do want to see what Hot Pockets are all about. I've heard so much about
none of this food actually tastes good. It was just like cheap alternatives when you're trying to raise a family. Like,
no, I wouldn't be able to do it. My taste buds are so different now. I probably would hate all this stuff.
It's like when you have, like, if I used to drink soda, and then when you stop drinking soda and you actually have a soda after a long time, it's disgusting.
It's horrible.
Yeah. So, okay, so this wasn't all that inspiring to you. I do find what you say interesting about the masking the symptoms versus addressing the root cause. And this is true of medicine. And I can think of another place where this is also very true. That is the world of mental health.
100%.
That is the world of mental health. That's the world in which we live and move and have our being at Catholic Psych. And there's so many different methodologies out there that are just mere band-aids. I'm probably going to tick people off when I say this, but like things like even Catholic mindfulness is not getting to the root cause. It is helping to address symptoms, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. That's another big one. Everybody loves CBT. That's the ones that the insurance companies reimburse for. Why? Because they trick you into thinking you could do a couple sessions of CBT, which they will, they'll pay for, and then they want you out. Any kind of like deeper long-term care, they're not gonna pay out for. But the reality is, you may address one symptom, but all you're doing is making that it's a manifestation of something deeper, and that the thing that is deeper, the issue that is deeper, is going to show up somewhere else and someone else is functioning. The easiest way to give an example of this is in the world of substance abuse, right? In the world of substance abuse, say someone quits drinking, well, then it's very common for them to develop gambling problems afterwards, or they start smoking cigarettes, or they put on weight, right? It's like, it's not addressing the root cause of what's going on. And that's the relational trauma. That's the deeper issues. We talk about how issues with mood, like you can kind of try and target them to help people's lives improve and they can function a little bit better day to day. But really, even those issues with mood are a byproduct, right? They're a byproduct between the environment of what's happening in your life right now, those external stressors, how the way things are arranged, and what's happening inside. And that interior architecture, the personality architecture, which developed around relationship patterns that go all the way back to the childhood. Yep, everyone, it's about mom and dad, and we know you don't want to go there, but it's about childhood trauma and relational trauma, lowercase t trauma, and like we learn ways to deal with the world when we're very young, and sometimes if we're hurt the same way over and over and over again through our relationships, even in implied messages, that crystallizes into a personality type and a personality structure. And there's nothing wrong with having that structure necessarily, as long as it's flexible to adapt to the world around it. So like you may like, we'll say, take somebody who has histrionic personality defenses, being the center of attention, right? There's nothing wrong with being charismatic and interesting and can do the song and dance or be funny and be the center of attention. It's only a problem when you have to be that all the time at the expense of other people, right? You don't have the flexibility when the environment changes, right? So when those are incongruent, your interior self and the outside world, that the byproduct is the anxiety and depression. Working with people who struggle with narcissism, right? They may go most of their lives never wanting to come to therapy or come to mentorship or needing anything until they lose their job, right? When they're at the top of their game and they're ordering people around, or or their wife leaves them, or their husband leaves them, because that kind of self-centered life, narcissistic life and perspective on the world doesn't work when you're in a relationship with someone. Right. So now you're in crisis. Suddenly you're anxious and depressed. Now you come in and you ask for, can you give me 5 sessions? Can you give me some strategies? I'm having a tough time right now. Can you give me some strategies to help with my anxiety and depression? No, but we could do some deep long-term work to go all the way back to your childhood and explore why you're still in a lot of pain and why you're terrified to act in a different way than the way you are crystallized to act all the time. So that's a little bit of a soapbox, but it's the same principle, right? Like treating the root cause versus treating the symptoms.
It's the exact same thing. The way you did a great job explaining it. I think the best example for me in this topic is like a porn addiction, porn and masturbation.
Yeah.
It's like what you need in the beginning is to break the cycle is where most people just stop. So it's like you go on this regimen of like, let's say you really struggle in the shower or whatever. Well, you just start taking cold showers and that eliminates that. But what it doesn't eliminate is the core need for intimacy.
You need both. You need the behavioral intervention.
You need to stop sinning, right? Like you need an immediate intervention to break the chain of mortal sin. And you need confession, you need the grace of the sacraments, and you need practical, helpful tools. You need accountability and brotherhood and guards on your phone, and all those things are really useful and they should not be dismissed. It's not like, oh, you just go do the deep work and then whatever. Like oftentimes that's legitimately the first step, like I remember, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, in fact, the risk is there's also a risk in only doing the deep work and kind of navel gazing indefinitely and just, providing someone empathy for how hard things have been for them and not actually cultivating and developing virtue in order to affect change. So you need the virtue building or behavioral intervention, whatever it is, the actual surfacey kind of intervention alongside the deeper level of understanding how one was hurt, why they were hurt, and what's interfering with just making the change up here.
Right. And the parallel to where we started it is like when I was 14 was the worst. I was the most sick I've ever been. Like my whole body felt like it was on fire. I went on medication, right? It stopped the pain. It stopped my whole body feeling like it was on fire. And I needed that. Yeah. But for that to be the last major flare I ever had, there had to be a deeper change. There had to be an emotional change, a psychological change, and a food change. And I changed all three. And when all three were changed together on a deep level, like that's where health was. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing for psychologically. Like when you're in a bad pattern, it's like, well, shit, sometimes you just like, you just need something that just gets you through the day.
That's true.
Then you can get after some of the larger stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of like when a client comes to me and they ask me about whether or not they should take medication. And there's a lot, especially in the Catholic world, a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with taking medication, and it's understandable as to why. I mean, it's not. I mean, in some cases with some kind of diagnostic presentations, medication is absolutely essential. Thinking of things like bipolar disorder or some schizophrenia and some kind of psychotic disorders or ADHD is, there's some, the neurological, sometimes the neurological is most important. But a lot of times it's not just OCD is another one that medication is very, very helpful. But OCD is a great example because you need both. You need to do the talk work and you need the medication. And with the goal of getting off the medication. I get the resistance. I get how the medication can affect your body. I get how terrible side effects can be. But if you can't function,
Yeah.
if you're having panic attacks, if you can't get in a plane, if you can't get out of bed, if you can't take care of your kids, if you can't go to work, like take the pill. Take the pill to get going and then do the hard work at the same time. So that you start walking with a crutch and you're building up your leg muscles, and then you remove the crutch as you're building up the leg muscles. So
Yes.
it's not to minimize the kind of surfacey interventions or obviously we promote Catholic mindfulness here. I don't mean to disparage Catholic mindfulness. It's great for stress-based reduction in the moment of teaching you how to be where you are to manage things and get out of your head. But it's not going to create the deep lasting change. It doesn't avoid the responsibility we have to do the deeper work.
No, and we have an unhealthy relationship with medication in our culture as a whole, and it's either an over reliance or such a deep seated suspicion and self reliance that it's inappropriate. And I think it's like you kind of touched on it a little bit, of which CBT therapy is driven because of that's what insurance companies love, and it's the same thing in the chronic illness world. Insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry love when people have to be on medication lifelong. They want that, right? It's a huge win for both. And
big pharma.
Big pharma. And it's a huge deal. And we want things to be driven by the human person and the needs of the human person and not by the bottom line dollar. So it's in the middle, right? It's being able to function. And once you're at the level of functionality, it's going and doing the deeper work. So you don't have to rely on medication. You don't have to rely on substances. You're actually able to walk as you were made to walk, which is the goal.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. Well, we're getting up about an hour here. Probably a good place to stop.
We bored the audience. No comments today.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple just kind of agreeing with us and showing appreciation. So that's good. That's good. Yeah, if you have questions and are watching this on a replay or have some thoughts or concerns, you can email us at mailbag@catholicpsych.com. Sooner or later, hopefully soon, we're going to get the right software so that people can call in live, like from their telephones. That would be fantastic. So we can have more of a dialogue and participation. I will be picking up Dr. Greg at the prison on Monday, so he should be back. He was falsely accused. Trust me. We'll get back to it next week. Hopefully this will help you slide into a nice, relaxing weekend, everyone. And Jack, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Subbing in.
My pleasure. Always good to be with you.
All right. Take care.